Welcome everybody. I'm Kathy Whaley with the ECTA Center. We're glad that you joined us today for the fourth webinar in the series on recommended practice for engaging families. I would like to introduce the other presenters today. Betsy Iankoya, also with ECTA, Peggy Kemp with the Division for Early Childhood, Chelsea Gillian, a Recommended Practices Ambassador from Illinois, and Stephanie Moss from the Region B PTAC. There have been 3 webinars to date that were held this summer. We wanted to let you know where all of those resources are filed. We provided the web link here, so if you were unable to participate in one of the 3 webinars, those video recordings and presentation files are available on the ECTA website. I want to recap quickly what has happened before we go into the content of webinar 4 today. So in the first webinar in June, we provided an overview of the Division for Early Childhood of the Council for Exceptional Children, known as DEC. We provided the origin and purpose of the DEC recommended practices, which we call the aRPs. We described the importance and the relevance of the practices for families and provided information on how to access the recommended practices. Webinar 2 in July, we focused more on resources and materials that can support family use of the DEC recommended practices. We shared the suite of resources that support the use by families, including checklists, practice guides, and videos. And we examined access and use of the resources to support families. In the third webinar in August, we continued the focus on resources and supports for parent centers by providing specific scenarios to illustrate what recommended practices and accompanying resources could be used by a parent center. And we provided specific scenarios for you to consider how the resources could be used by a parent center. With that, I would like to turn the webinar over to Peggy Kemp.
Good afternoon. I am happy to be with you again, or for the first time for those of you just joining. This series has been very exciting as we talk about the ways that the Division for Early Childhood Recommended Practices can be used by all partners. So the objectives for today's webinar are that we all become familiar with the purpose and intended benefits of the aRPy Ambassador Initiative, that the role of family ambassador become more familiar, and that the process and qualifications for applying to be an aRPy family ambassador become very familiar, and questions are answered at this point for those who may consider moving that direction. So we think about today, what is the purpose of an aRPy ambassador? And as aRPy, it's really, as the initiative moves forward and from the very beginning, is to bring awareness to the importance of the recommended practices that are within the Division for Early Childhood, and to share and disseminate information about the recommended practices, to promote the recommended practices by practitioners, families, and leaders. As a refresher, the recommended practices really are put together by a group of stakeholders, but vetted by that same group, practitioners, families, and leaders. And so we look forward to really bringing to life the purpose of the aRPs, and that's use across all environments, across all adults in the lives of young children with disabilities and their families. And also to share information about the materials and products that support the use of the recommended practices. especially those that are within the Early Childhood Technical Assistance or ECTA suite of products. So who are the aRPy ambassadors? Our original cohort began in 2016. During this first cohort, the focus was on recruiting professionals from diverse fields, and most of those recruited were state-level professional development providers or technical assistance providers, staff at university and college, faculty, and state agency staff. And also a focus on those who were DEC members, either long-term or just beginning their engagement with DEC and wanting to integrate that work into what they were already doing. But the first cohort came to us with some pretty deep connections to the field. And you can find out more about those ambassadors at that web link. But here's a picture of our fantastic ambassador cohort. As you can see, we crossed a number of states, including those you see here. Those same ambassadors, most of them have been active and excited about the work since 2016. Today, specifically, you will hear a bit about what it means to be an ambassador and the type of work that's involved by Chelsea Gillen from the University of Illinois. So Chelsea is a member of the commission that revised the current recommended practices. It's now a committee, the Recommended Practices Committee from the Division for Early Childhood. Just as a note to that, we do have parent representation on that commission, as well as access when changes are made to the aRPys to the field, including parents. Chelsea is an early intervention ombudsman, and she's with the EI training program as a professional development and TA provider. She is the family member of children who receive services in EI and ECSE, and currently serves on the DEC Executive Board. So Chelsea is going to share her experiences with us.
Thanks, Peggy, and good afternoon, everyone. So they're going to ask me to talk about just a few things here. First of all, we're going to talk about why I became an aRPy ambassador. And I think it's really because as the early intervention ombudsman, the bulk of my job really focuses on improving the quality of the early intervention system. And it really felt like implementation of the recommended practices was a natural fit for these efforts. Being an ambassador also allowed me to focus on raising awareness of the recommended practices. Focusing on these practices helps ensure that the practices that are being used in the field have demonstrated success, something that's very important to me. As another aspect of my job, I am also involved in a lot of Illinois' inclusion initiatives, and so I wanted to be sure that other sectors and systems knew about how these practices could be used to support children that are participating in their settings. And due to my personal experiences, I also wanted to be sure that we were thinking about families and how they could benefit from an understanding of the recommended practices, because I believe quite strongly that the recommended practices can help shape families' expectations of their team members and what they should really be getting from the system. Some of the things that I have done in terms of my ambassador activities is really spreading the word to both or through both individual trainings as well as conference presentations for a variety of audiences. And so while my initial efforts were certainly targeted towards folks that are in early intervention and early childhood special education systems, I've also done outreach to early Head Start, child care, and other early childhood program audiences. I also got to do a Facebook Live presentation as well as a number of webinars to increase awareness to specific audiences that may not be attending more traditional professional development opportunities. I also had the opportunity to contribute to a quarterly newsletter article that goes out to all the families involved in our early intervention system. And so, as I said before, it was really important for me to think about how families might benefit from the work of the Recommended Practices Committee. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't ignore that audience. And then given my role in professional development and system work, I've also tried to help ensure that we have a focus on the recommended practices, both in our ongoing professional development offerings, as well as incorporating the practices when we develop new policies and procedures for the early intervention system. I think some of the things that I have gained from being an aRPy ambassador are that it really allowed me to spend more time focused on the practices. I really feel like that deepened my understanding of the practices as well as the tools that were available to support their implementation. I've also really benefited from the support from the other ambassadors as well as ECTA and DEC staff members. The calls with the other ambassadors have truly helped with generating ideas for how we might embed these practices or utilize tools, and have certainly sparked creativity. I also think that the announcement that ECTA produced about the initiative on the front end back in 2016 really provided an opportunity for me to reach audiences that I might not have otherwise had access to. I think next Stephanie is going to talk to us about family ambassadors.
Thanks, Chelsea. So yes, so we're really excited. If this is the first time you've joined us, want to welcome you. But if you've been with us throughout the webinar series, you've heard our enthusiasm and our excitement about the opportunity to roll out a family ambassador component to the aRPy ambassadors, and why. So if you're wondering why, and you're thinking about why is that, why are you adding that on? Why is that important now? We heard just what Chelsea said, and I think we all know this, but families do play the most critical roles in their children's development, and these are such great not only resources, but the practices themselves that we needed to really think about a way to further disseminate that information and get it into the hands of families of young children so that we're really supporting their ability to meaningfully engage in their child's development and really build true partnerships and to empower families to know what to ask for and to what to expect and what to look for in their children's services. So we want to, as I said, give families better access to and more knowledge about the tools and the resources, because we believe, obviously, that it'll help them advocate for their own children and for other children. So really beginning to build family leaders across the country through this Family Ambassador Project. That knowledge is power, and the ability to know about the resources, know about the recommended practices, and really understand them at a deeper level, whether acting independently as a family ambassador, or for some of you who might apply to be ambassadors may find yourself in a state where there's also a professional ambassador, and the ability to work together with that person who, like Chelsea's experiences, maybe in professional development and provision of technical assistance to various audiences. The ability to work together to co-present and to learn from one another is going to really grow and further support family leaders as they are building their skills and emerging. So what we see, the role of the family ambassadors is very similar to the role of the original cohort of aRPy ambassadors, but it really has, of course, a little bit of a different focus, because the resources and the tools and the recommended practices, we want to bring that knowledge to families across the country, and the best way to do that is through the Parent Center Network. And so this cohort of family ambassadors coming from parent centers and the PTAC network will have that ability and hopefully help us to spread the knowledge and awareness of those tools throughout the network, and also collaborate with one another. So learning across states about what's working and what are the strategies that they might be using to reach families and inform them about the practice. We'll hear Chelsea talk about Facebook Live and newsletter articles and things like that. But what else might we do to reach families, and what other things are the family ambassadors going to bring to this work that they can share and help us really learn about the best ways to disseminate information? Okay, and further, again, to share the recommended practices and the resources with your colleagues. So, for example, a family ambassador within their own state would be expected to share internally within your own parent center, to share it with your colleagues at your parent center. We know everybody has lots of work to do, and the phone's constantly ringing, and there's trainings to do and things to keep, balls to juggle and keep in the air, but to make sure that we're sharing the information both within our own centers and across centers. So if you're in a state where there are multiple parent centers, maybe there's a community parent resource center and a PTI, you're sharing across agencies, and again, sharing across states, so that we're furthering that knowledge. And as I mentioned before, when there's a family ambassador and also a professional ambassador, thinking about we will help you guys connect, and then thinking about ways to further raise awareness and spread the knowledge and information throughout your service area in your state.
Hi, everyone.
Over to Betsy. I'm sorry. Yes, I think I'm turning it over to Betsy now to talk a little bit more about the actual expectations and application.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy that you kind of hung in with us through this series. We're really, Voice is really excited about this aspect of our work. So I know you've been wanting to know, so what does it mean? What are we going to have to do if we're going to become a family ambassador? So here's what our expectations are. We are asking folks to commit for a minimum of 2 years, but you don't have to stick with 2 years. If you want to renew afterwards, we're going to have an option for you to do that. So think about, can I serve for 2 years? We are going to have a virtual orientation once we have all of the ambassadors selected, and we are also planning a face-to-face meeting where folks will be able to come together for the orientation. Not just the new ambassadors, but you will have an opportunity to interface with the current ambassadors as well. We're going to ask you to develop an annual work plan. Think about their activities for the next year and what are the opportunities for dissemination and that you're going to be able to have that next year, and really develop a plan that we can support you in. We're also going to ask the ambassadors to participate in at least one national meeting or conference. And typically that meeting or conference has been the fall DEC conference, but that gives you an opportunity to collaborate with your fellow ambassadors and also to help disseminate information. And we many times are able to incorporate the ambassadors in some of the presentations and sharing some of the work that's been done. And this is what we're asking for you, and here's how we're going to provide support. Of course, I think Chelsea mentioned before some of the announcements and information that we put out ahead of time, so we're going to provide press releases and announcements and really help folks who are around you know that you are now an ambassador. So that kind of acknowledgement we found ambassadors are found to be helpful. You'll have a DC conference registration rate. Probably most likely have that be able to participate in that conference at a reduced or free rate. We're going to be developing ready-to-use materials that are just for you, presentations that you can, that you'll be able to personalize for your own work, and products that you're going to be able to use to help you to disseminate information about the recommended practices and the materials. We are developing a toolkit that's got materials that you can download and use, whether they're going to be flyers or whether they're going to be handouts. Those things we're putting together. We will be providing travel support to participate in some of the meetings. Your peers, your peer ambassadors will be able to support you. You'll be able to support one another and provide some technical assistance. And we also have a private forum, which is a website where you'll be able to share information with the other ambassadors. You'll be able to go on and see what activities they've been engaged in. You'll be able to share successes. And we have had like monthly calls where you'll be able to talk with one another about what's happening in your area and really get share questions and poll one another about what works well, what have been some challenges and what have been some successes. And now, how do I become an ambassador? So as you see, the requirements are fairly simple. So the important thing now is to talk about those requirements and discuss the opportunity with your leadership team, about how might we benefit. We're going to ask that you provide a letter of support from your agency or organization and your supervisor that says, yes, our agency is supporting this individual as an ambassador, and we see this as an integral part of their job and the work that they're going to be doing. We'll have an online application that you'll be able to complete. We're going to ask you in your application to commit to participating in that face-to-face orientation. Right now, we're thinking that's going to be either end of March, but more likely early April, and that you'll be participating in a virtual meeting. We will have a conference calls or webinar in preparation for our face-to-face meeting. So when does all of this happen? We are expecting to have applications available by October 1. And right now we will be sending a notice to our email list that we have. We'll be posting the application to our website and to our email listservs. We're gonna give about a 5-week turnaround and ask for those applications to come back by November 8th, along with your support letters. And our aim is to have our selection process complete and have new ambassadors notified by December 13th. So we're hoping that this will give folks time really to think about calendars and, arranging your schedule so that you can participate in that. So now we're going to open it up for your questions. So you have different options. If you would like to, we're going to ask Christine to unmute lines and give folks an opportunity to unmute themselves to ask a question live. If you would like to post a question in the chat room, you may do that, and we're monitoring. So let's just give just a second and see what questions do you have based on not just what you've heard today, but over the last couple of months. Does someone have a question? Okay, there is a question in the chat book, in the chat box. It says, I work for PTI, so other initiatives such as this have to be tied to some form of grant money. Do you have suggestions for what past ambassadors have used?
So this is Stephanie, and I would just, if I could just clarify a little. I think there's a couple of, I'm not positive I understand the question, but I'm going to just talk, and if I don't, please, to the person who asked the question, please just clarify for us. I think that, you heard Betsy talk about the things that would be covered and the expenses that would be covered as part of the orientation and support ongoing. I think that we all need to, one of the things to keep in mind is that as parent centers, we serve families whose children are from birth to 26 years of age. So certainly working, getting this training and this information and helping to disseminate it could be, I think that you could make the case that falls under the umbrella of the work that you do as a parent center. I think one of the things we did in webinar 3 was spend a lot of time talking about how the recommended practices and the resources could be used in the work you already do. So whether that's in trainings that you deliver to families, or in sharing the resources or the tools with individual families. I think that you could build a work plan around doing some of that, and it would fit nicely under the umbrella of the work that we do as parent centers. But if I missed the point of your question, please clarify for us.
And Stephanie, this is Kathy. If this is a person who wasn't on in the very beginning, we do have the recording and the PowerPoint for all of the webinars, so you could see those great illustrations and scenarios that Stephanie's referencing.
Yeah, I would definitely say, so she did respond and say that was a good answer and she got it. But I would also say if you didn't see particularly webinar 3, that would be the one I would point to as just sort of a real quick kind of catch yourself up, because that's where we really focused the bulk of the time on actual scenarios of things, ways that you might use this knowledge and information in the work of Parent Center.
Thanks, Stephanie and Kathy for that. I know we also have another one of our ambassadors that's signed on as a participant, and I'm wondering if you have anything you would be interested in sharing as well. Okay, I see another comment in the chat from Diana. Thanks, Diana. Diana says, I was able to use some of the resources for families, which are in English and Spanish, from the DEC recommended practices during a site visit to aPNI. Okay, that's the Puerto Rico PTI, and found very helpful.
That's great. Thanks, Diana.
And this is Evelyn, and I see that there is a question in the Q&A. And from Baby, or BB, I'm with the Parent Center and I'm the editor of our monthly magazine. Can we share the information in our newsletter, or do we need permission because of copyright laws?
So BB, when you say sharing the information, do you mean sharing the information about the application, or sharing information about the practices?
And the tools.
And the tools.
She says tools and practices.
Well,
so can they use the tools and practices, highlight them, for example, in a monthly newsletter?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That would be fabulous.
You can do that.
Yes, they're all. This is Evelyn Shaw, and they're all, available online for anyone to really use and download. But that would be wonderful.
And this is Peggy from DEC. In terms of the DEC recommended practices, the same thing. They're absolutely open access. The only thing we, of course, ask is that you credit them back to the DEC website, add the link, etc. And our only other piece is they cannot be changed in any way without permission of DEC. But other than that, we hope that it's used as many ways as you can think of to use it in as many audiences, and would love to hear the different ways that I think all of us would love to hear different ways that you think of to use the practices and the products, regardless if you join us as an ambassador or not, though we hope that you do. We're very excited to have the family partnership and really expanding the reach of the practices. DEC is really focused as a priority on our family, embedding family voice in all of the work of DEC. So look forward to how creative you are in using the practices and the products.
Absolutely. Other questions?
looks like there's more in the chat.
Let me see. Let's see. Stephanie Owen says, I'm from Alabama. My first time hearing about this family ambassador. I'm late. I'm longing because of previous training. I plan to go back and watch the previous webinars. My question is there currently an ambassador in our state or one in prior years? Stephanie, glad you asked. There was an ambassador from Alabama, though not a family ambassador. Jerry, I don't know her last name, just went out of my head. But she retired recently, so there's currently not an ambassador. Jerry Jackson, I'm sorry, that's her last name, who was with the EI program in Alabama, but has retired. So you don't currently have one in your state, but I hope that makes you interested in thinking about that.
Well, and if I could add to, this is Stephanie, just to kind of clarify for folks, there's not an ambassador in every state, and so even that first cohort, what was it, Peggy? I don't know the number, I can't remember now, but there's never been one in every state. So but the opportunities there, for anyone to apply. And if I could just continue talking for just a second, Diana asked how many family ambassadors we're looking to recruit. And I believe in this first cohort, we're going to look to about 10. And we want to do a nice spread of those. We're hoping that they come from both parent centers and some connection to the PTACs so that we can continue to spread that information and knowledge through the PTAC folks who are providing TA in each of the regions.
This is Evelyn, and I think we had initially somewhere around 15 or so ambassadors when we first started. And I see that we have another question. Maya says, it sounds silly, but there's never a silly question, but can there be more than one ambassador in a state? And I'm not sure, are you probably talking about more than one family ambassador? And I'm going to punt that one to Betsy and others.
As Stephanie said, we are looking for a spread across the nation, but I think it remains to be seen what applicants we get in. I do know that we have 2 professional ambassadors from one state, so I think that what we want is folks who are interested in being a family ambassador to send in their application, and you will not know until that comes in.
Right. And I think, too, we do hope that there'll be, I think it would be nice to see what happens if we have some states where there's already a professional ambassador to have a family ambassador, too, and to see how that partnership can really grow and what that might look like going forward, because I think we'll learn a lot from that as well.
And this is Evelyn. There's actually, it's a very nice comment from Anna Brecht from, I hope I had your name right, I hope I didn't butcher it, who's a clinical specialist with Infant Toddler Connection of Fairfax Falls Church, Virginia. And she says they've used the resources from the ECTA website for teaming practices, for teaming and probably professional development, pre and post feedback, and share the resources from the ECTA website. Showed our staff how to navigate the website, and that staff consists of OTs, PTs, speech language pathologists, and infant educator. And Chelsea shared a link to the newsletter that she prepared as an example in the chat box. So thanks, Chelsea.
These are great questions, great conversation. There was a comment from Phoebe Wrinkle. Thanks for being on, Phoebe, my ambassador from Kansas. Says, as a state ambassador, letting people know about the high quality, evidence-based, family-oriented products and tools are available for anyone. Right, thanks. Any other questions? Let's take one more minute to see if there's someone who has a burning question that hasn't had an opportunity to ask it yet. I do want to say that if you think of a question after you're off the phone or after you've had a chance to review the other webinars, if you haven't had an opportunity to, feel free to give us to email us, and we'll be happy to address it. Want to say thank you all for participating again. Thank you, Chelsea, for joining us and sharing your experience. If you go to our website, you'll see we have what you've heard from all of our team members who are on our work group for ambassadors. Kathy Whaley, Allison Jones, Stephanie Moss, Peggy Kemp, Evelyn Shaw, and Alex Lazaro, who's done a lot of our behind the scenes work. Christine Wagner, who's been supporting our work with the webinars. We just want to say thank you all, and give us a couple of weeks and we will be getting information out with the applications, and look forward to getting back and seeing who our new family ambassador is going to be. We're very excited about this opportunity. Thank you for joining us, and have a good rest of your afternoon.